start with a list of names, because the names are where this gets strange. A 31-year-old endurance champion who races sports cars for Toyota on the weekends, he isn't in a Formula One car. A young Australian who was in a race seat a year ago, lost it after 6 Grand Prix, and washed up here. A rotating cast of Japanese single-seater talent, logging kilometer after kilometer in a car 2 seasons out of date. All of them, quietly, passing through the cockpit of the smallest team on the grid, a team that, for a decade, could barely afford to run a single test. None of them is going to start a race for that team this year. Everyone in the paddock knows it, so the question that hangs over the whole arrangement is a simple one, and nobody running the program will answer it directly. If these drivers aren't being prepared to race, what exactly are they being used for? Because a team doesn't assemble a bench this deep by accident. Somebody is building something here, one name at a time. And if you want to understand what the finished machine is actually for, and whose seat it's quietly being shaped around, stay with this and get subscribed, because the drivers everyone's looking at are not the driver this is about. To see the shape of it, you have to understand the door Toyota walked through. A door most of the grid forgot was even there. It's a provision buried in the FIA's rulebook called testing of previous cars. In an era where running the current car outside of a handful of preseason days is essentially banned, TPC is the one legal space left to put a Formula One car on a track, as long as that car is at least 2 years old. Teams use it to keep their race crews sharp and give young drivers real mileage. It's routine. It's the kind of rule nobody thinks about twice. For Haas, though, that rule may as well not have existed. Running an old car is expensive. You rent the circuit, truck the machinery across a continent, build spares for an obsolete chassis, burn through tires. For the leanest, most cost-conscious team on the grid, TPC was a luxury it simply never used. The allocation sat there, year after year, empty. An empty allocation, inside the poorest team on the grid. That's the space Toyota quietly filled, and the terms it filled it on are the whole story. And it hasn't stopped at the testing program. Over the 2 years this partnership has deepened. The team's headcount has climbed from around 230 people to roughly 380. A wholesale expansion of an operation that used to pride itself on being the smallest, leanest outfit on the grid. That's not the footprint of a sponsor buying visibility. It's the footprint of an organization being quietly rebuilt to hold more than it used to. Toyota would fund the testing Haas couldn't afford. In return, the program would carry Toyota's name, and Toyota's people would run it. Under a formally branded development program, the company began putting its own drivers in that 2-year-old car, Ryo Hirakawa, embedded in the team since early last year, alongside a rotating cast of its junior and endurance talent. And this is the point where the obvious reading and the real one part ways. On the surface, it's a driver academy, a car maker giving its young racers a taste of Formula One. That's the story the branding tells. But look at who's actually in the seat. Hirakawa is 31 and races sports cars full-time. The newest signing, Jack Doohan, arrived carrying one of the rawest recent stories on the grid, a driver who finally got his Formula One debut with Alpine, held the seat for just 6 races into last season, then watched it handed to someone else while he was pushed back into a reserve role and, eventually, out of the team entirely. He's 23, quick, and desperate to race. He landed at Haas not as a future starter, but as a body to fill a reserve slot and log simulator hours. These aren't prospects being groomed for a debut, which means the value of the program was never really the men doing the driving. It was what their driving produces. Because every lap, one of those drivers' turns generates something Haas has never fully controlled before: data. For its entire existence, this team developed its car inside someone else's building. It had no simulator of its own. To prepare for a season, its engineers flew to Maranello and worked on Ferrari's machine, on Ferrari's schedule, which meant that every setup idea, every weakness, every direction the team explored was visible to the engine supplier it shares a grid with. Then Toyota built it a private one. As part of the deal, a driver-in-the-loop simulator was funded and installed inside the Haas base in England, online around the middle of this season, the first the team has ever owned. But a simulator is only as good as the real-world data you feed it. And this is where the roll call of drivers stops looking like an academy and starts looking like a supply line. Every kilometer Hirakawa and the others log on those private test days becomes raw material. Telemetry, tire behavior, the way a real car loads and slides, fed back to that simulator, so Toyota's engineers can calibrate the digital model against reality. The drivers aren't chasing lap times. They're writing the reference data that teaches the machine what a real Haas does on track. And that matters more than it sounds, because a simulator isn't neutral. The way it's calibrated, how it models grip, how it rewards a particular braking style, what it treats as the fast way around a corner, quietly shapes every setup decision that flows out of it. Tune it around one kind of driver, and the whole development direction of the car starts, subtly, to favor that driver's instincts. The people writing that calibration aren't just preparing a tool. They're deciding, in advance, what kind of driver the finished car will feel best in the hands of. Whoever controls that correlation quietly controls the direction of the car. And it's worth being precise here, because it's easy to let a story like this run past the facts. Nobody's breaking a rule. Nothing's being stolen. This is the legitimate, sanctioned use of a testing program every top team runs. What's unusual isn't the mechanism, it's who's operating it, and what it lets them build. An engineering feedback loop inside a rival-powered team that increasingly answers to Toyota rather than to the engine badge on the back of the car. So the drivers are building the road. The simulator is drawing the map, which leaves the only question that actually matters: where the road leads. And to see that, you have to look at the current race seats and ask which one is quietly load-bearing and which one is quietly exposed. One of them can't be touched. Oliver Behrman is a Ferrari Jr., and for as long as Ferrari supplies the engines bolted into the back of that car, his seat carries Maranello's protection. The other seat has no such shield. Esteban Ocon was signed as the steady veteran, a race winner on his day, but his deal runs only through the end of 2026, and he has nothing anchoring him inside this new structure. He isn't a Ferrari Jr. He has no history with Toyota. He brings no fortune of his own. He's a contracted racing driver in the one seat that, when the music stops, nobody powerful is obligated to save. That's the seat all those quiet test kilometers seem to circle, because the whole apparatus, the funded program, the imported drivers, the simulator calibrated to a specific feel, only makes sense if it's being built for someone. Someone fast enough to justify it. Someone the program's Japanese backer would badly want. Someone who, right now, is running out of road somewhere else on the grid. Look for a driver who is fast, proven, and about to be stranded. And one name answers all three: Yuki Tsunoda. After years inside the Red Bull system, funded and shielded his whole career by Honda, Tsunoda's path has narrowed to almost nothing. Honda is leaving the Red Bull orbit to become the works engine partner at Aston Martin, and Aston's seats are already filled by Alonso and Stroll. Honda's most successful modern driver can't follow Honda through that door. By 2027, the read goes, he could be a genuinely quick, deeply experienced Formula One driver with no manufacturer left to carry him. A stranded asset, exactly the kind of driver a patient project waits for. And there's a particular weight to who Tsunoda is in this specific story. He is Honda's driver, its most successful modern Formula One product, brought up and paid for by the great Japanese rival Toyota, has measured itself against for decades. In the cold logic of the driver market, signing him would just be smart business, a proven point scorer, available, unattached. But laid over the history between these two companies, it stops being only business. Taking Honda's golden boy and turning him into a Toyota factory driver, in the one market where both names carry the most weight, is the kind of move a company doesn't make for the points alone. It makes it because of what it means. Here's where the honest version has to slow the story down though, because the tidy conspiracy isn't the only reading the facts allow. The team's principal has said, flatly, that performance decides who drives, and that Toyota will not pay to put a driver in a seat he hasn't earned, because the moment it did, the whole project would look like a giant buying its way onto the grid. Doohan's arrival has a mundane explanation too. Hirakawa races sports cars on many of the same weekends, so the team simply needed a second reserve for cover. Every piece of this has a calm, innocent version. The argument was never that any single move is a smoking gun. It's that the pattern, laid end to end, points somewhere. So watch that empty seat, because everything in this story is quietly pointing at it. A development program that trains drivers who'll never race for the team. A simulator, being tuned to a feel that doesn't match either current driver. A veteran with no protection, sitting in a seat with an expiry date. And, somewhere off in the Red Bull wreckage, Exactly the driver this whole machine seems built to receive, running low on options, at precisely the moment the machine will be ready for him. Maybe it's all coincidence. Maybe Ocon rediscovers his form and makes the seat his own, and Tsunoda lands somewhere else entirely, and the roll call of test drivers really was just an academy after all. That's the version the team will tell you, and it might even be true. But you don't build a machine this carefully to leave it empty. So here's what I want to know from you. Watch it from Esteban Ocon's side of the garage for a second. A driver being asked to develop a car, on data gathered by the reserves lining up behind him, inside a simulator paid for by a company that has never hidden which nationality of driver it dreams of putting on the grid. How long does a man keep his seat when the whole building is quietly being rebuilt around the shape of someone else? Tell me where you land in the comments.